Hey there, friends. I'm your host, Eric Branner, musician, educator, and founder of Fonz, the platform that helps music teachers run thriving studios. Today, I'm talking with Joe Bergamini, pro drummer, educator, author, editor, and one of the most connected and respected figures in the drumming world. Joe has played over 15 Broadway shows, tours internationally with the Doo-Wop Project, and appears on recordings with progressive rock bands Happy the Man and Forefront. He's performed live with Billy Joel, Dennis DeYoung of Styx, and Debbie Gibson. Joe's also a best-selling author and editor, having collaborated with giants of the instrument including Neil Peart, Stuart Copeland, and Steve Gadd. He runs his own private drum studio for over 35 years, serves as director of the Sabian Educators Network, and has been the senior drum editor at Hudson Music since 2009. Today we're going to talk about longevity, creativity, the changing world of music education, and what it means to build a resilient, multi-hyphenate career in the arts. Let's dive in. Welcome, Joe. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad you're here. How are you doing?
Hey, Eric. Thanks for having me. And it was great to meet you at the Percussive Arts Society convention a couple weeks back.
It was great. And we were just talking about this. That was my first time there. And I loved it because it was amazing seeing this world of drummers, their own little island. And my first introduction to you was seeing you at the Sabian table with just a sea of drumming educators around you trying to get to chat with you. And it seemed like quite a festive event.
It was so great. And when you say that, you remind me, I know a big focus and a big segment of our audience here is music teachers, private instructors, right? And my drum teacher, Dom Famularo, was one of the most respected, as many of us music teachers become, not just a music lessons teacher, but a giver of life advice, a true motivator. And he changed my life as my teacher. And I used to go to those things and see him at the booth, like surrounded like that. So to hear you say that about me, it's like really emotional. Like it's another level of just, wow, man, I always pinch myself that I got here. And you're a guitar player. So you can tell me if this is accurate or not. Dom used to, at his drum clinics, used to say, us drummers, we love to share. If a guitar player is up there and he's playing some riff and he sees some other guitar player looking at his hands, and he turns around, hides the neck, and the drummer sees another drummer playing. He's like, "Oh, come here, man! I'll show you. Here's the sticking, right, left, right." And we do seminars to show each other the stuff. I guess I don't know if that's accurate on guitar players. He was kind of,
I don't know if we're known for a culture of sharing, but definitely having reverence and holding reverence for our great mentors, though, which sounds like that's amazing. That's the first thing that came to your mind. And I think you and I talked about, what was his name again? Dom Famularo?
Dom Famularo, yeah.
Yeah, and he was your biggest influence, I'd say, on your career?
Yeah, so yes. And so, you mentioned all the different things I do. I guess, you hipped me to the fact that there's a word for this, multi-hyphenate. I didn't know that. I didn't know this. I didn't know some of the things I do. I didn't even know they existed when I was in school. I was just trying to figure it out. So when I started playing drums, I wanted to be a rock star. I wanted to play in a big band, and I was, just to give you a little history, I started playing in the 7th grade. In high school, I had some local teachers, and I did everything you could do in the school. I played in the marching band and the school musical and the jazz band and everything. I had my own band. We played everywhere. We would arrange gigs. We would rent out the church gymnasium and sell tickets and put on a show. And, if my class was doing a bake sale, I would be like, yo, you cannot have a bake sale without a band. My band has to play the bake sale, So we literally would play everywhere. And so I pursued that dream and didn't know anybody in the music business, my parents believed in me and supported me beyond belief, but we didn't know anybody that did this for a living. And then one day I was out of high school. I was in one of my first bands. I was trying to get a record deal and stuff. By luck of my birth, I was born right near New York City, a major music market, and didn't have to move anywhere. And you could showcase and do things. And so I was playing in a battle of the bands. And my band didn't win, but a guy came up to me. His name was Al Marinaro. He, at the time, worked with Tama Drums. And he said, you sound really great. You should study with my friend, Dom Famularo. Oh. And so that's how that happened. I went back home through my stack of paper Modern Drummer magazines. And I looked through the magazine. I used to read it like the Bible, And I was like, there he is, Dom Famularo, a famous drummer. Sure enough, he was doing a clinic in my area. And I went with this man, Al, who became like my godfather, sort of. and we went down and saw Dom play. He was doing a clinic with Liberty DeVito from Billy Joel's band, in a really interesting moment of foreshadowing, because my first show on Broadway and probably one of the biggest breaks of my career was playing the show Moving Out on Broadway, which was Billy Joel's music. And so I saw Dom play and I was like, I got to study with this guy. And then I just started taking lessons, driving 3 hours each way to his place on Long Island.
Oh.
And I studied with him for 6 years. And he basically explained to me how the music business works, everything outside of just like being the drummer in a band. And never really like, and by the way, my parents wanted me to have a fallback plan. So I went locally in New Jersey to college for architecture. So I was in architecture school while I was doing this. And Dom was just teaching me like, hey man, so when you're teaching, you're going to do this. And I'm like, teaching? Well, I never thought about that. And I was like, well, I love coming to him. Maybe I'd like teaching. So I started teaching, and I was like 20. And that was it. I've been a teacher. Being a private drum teacher has been a pillar of my career ever since then. And Dom basically, he was my mentor, and he just, was like, this guy believes in me, man. Wow.
That's just a beautiful story on so many levels. And there's so many little spots that I just took quick notes as you were discussing, because I'm always looking about like what makes people tick. And yes, some of the things that we do share with guitar teachers, yes, or guitar players and drummers, is yes, I too wanted to be a rock star. Yeah. And I poured through Guitar for the Practicing Musician, just like you went through Modern Drummer magazine, like exactly same universe, finding our mentors. And I loved how you said something about, it was a little tidbit. You said, if you're gonna have a bake sale, my band's got to play it. It sounds like you were pretty confident about your music young, right? You were like, hey, I'm going to share this music with people. You seemed like you put yourself out there. And because this is something that I usually see in the first moments of talking with someone like you, who's done really great, big, adventurous things, is there's a tendency to be bold before maybe you were even ready to be bold, right? But you just had it in you where you loved the music. And I think that transfers into what kind of teacher you become too. Because you're like, wait, I love doing this. And I loved learning. And my teacher was awesome. And now I'm going to be that awesome teacher. And I think there's a confidence there, which is that a safe kind of observation?
I think it is. That's a funny topic because I feel like in some ways I was more confident then than I am now. There's a thing you may have heard of. It's called conscious knowing. You know about this?
No, but I want to.
So I'm not sure if I'm getting all the words right, but there's this idea that when you start out, you're in a place called unconscious unknowing. You don't know anything, and you don't know that you don't know anything. You can't, you're just completely clueless.
Right.
And then you start trying to learn to play an instrument, and you get to a place of, conscious unknowing. You're like, wow, I love Steve Vai, or I love Eddie Van Halen, and oh my God, I suck. Wow. Yes. That's hard to do. Like when someone's like doesn't know anything about the drums, they're like, oh, that must be easy. Then very quickly they start learning to play. They're like, wow, this is really hard. Conscious unknowing. And then you work really hard, and eventually you get good at playing your instrument, and you get to this place of conscious knowing where you're like, you're good at some level, but you realize like, wow, I have a lot to learn. And I think conscious knowing is where every good musician pretty much spends their whole life once they get good at playing an instrument. And I think on the cusp of me getting into conscious knowing, I had a bravado. I just wanted to play for everybody. I was like, this is great. I'm good at it. I can't wait. And then, of course, by the way, the final level is unconscious knowing, which is where Steve Gadd and Eddie Van Halen and Max Roach and the true greats live, where they're at one with the instrument. I guess in your lingo today, you'd call it flow state, where I just think it's a beautiful thing. It's like, does Steve Gadd like ever think about anything mechanical, or does he just go directly to emotion? So anyway, I loved the music so much. I was so into music, I just thought it was so cool. And it was, at the time I grew up, I don't know that one thing that might be a little different now. I try not to be, like I'm 55, right? So I'm trying not to be like, oh yeah, back in the day, it was so great. But I think there was all the music I liked was so woven into the culture. I was a little nerdy kid and I joined this band and we were playing Ozzy and Dio and Rush and Maiden and I was cool. Suddenly I was like cool. And people were like, dude, how'd you get, you're good at the drums. You know, this is a guy who like my dad is a total jock and I sucked at every sport because I weighed like 99 pounds, you know. Now I can play the drums and like girls are like, wow, that was a really good drum solo. I was like, okay, I found my calling, you know. But anyway, no, I felt really connected to the music, especially Rush and You'll Hear It. Like there was just a mystique and a coolness and I don't know, everything about it kind of spoke to me. It was like beyond just, it was the drums in the context of all this other stuff. So I had this really like, I was pretty confident. Yeah, I guess I was pretty confident. And, you know, you have to be confident when you're a drummer because, you know, especially when you get into the professional world, you know, nobody wants to play with a drummer who's like, yeah, I don't know, is it this tempo? You know, they want to, you want to play with a drummer who's like, here it is, bro, right here, sit on this. So yeah, I would say so, but I'm a very open book. I have a lot of students who come in and they're, you know, as you probably do. I find it sort of hilarious that I could be considered an intimidating figure, but every day students come in, they're like, I was just doing this at home and I get so nervous playing in front of you, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm here to tell you, sitting in the Broadway pit when you're subbing a show, it never gets easier. Those first few shows in, man, I've never been that nervous. I mean, it's, you know, I'm jumping all over the place here. I know.
No, you're actually really not. And you said some really cool things. One is this quadrant of the journey. I love the unconscious knowing that's where we want to get. That's what we want glimpses of, or what we all want to try to attain. I can't wait to learn more about that. But I think there's a lot of insight there that I'm sure you pass on to your students too. And I agree. The longer you play, there's certain moments that it's a different kind of nervousness and it's more intense, right? Because now we're supposed to be good and we're supposed to be here. And what we want to do is move into that flow state, like you're talking about. And I really like how you outlined that formative era that you came up in, because it really was a special time to become an instrumentalist. Same thing with guitar. It was really cool to practice 8 hours a day. It was Steve Vai, like you just mentioned, he shared his 12-hour workout. And he went to bed 1 hour later every day. And so he worked on a 24-hour schedule. And it was hilarious. I remember just being 13 and be like, oh my gosh, I've got to do this. And it was a social currency. And music is a great way always to bring people together. But it's really good wherever you are in your career and you're listening to this, is that those nerves don't go away. But the reality is, when you talk to a lot of other instrumentalists, like I would say a lot of pianists too, a lot of piano teachers move to a point where they don't perform as much, right? Or they don't get a lot of joy out of it because that nervousness kind of takes over. They're the teacher and they don't want to put themselves out there. And it's always great to see the ones that still have that joy of playing. And you know, I wanted to ask you, when someone comes up to you and meets you and they say, you know, hey, Joe, nice to meet you. What do you do? How do you describe yourself? Like, what does a drummer like yourself say? Hey, so, you know, what do you do, man? What is that?
You know, like, sometimes, you know, I'll be sitting on an airplane and
yeah,
you know,
airplane chat.
Yeah, and you know the person next to you, and first of all, they say, well, you know, I guess it's still cool to say, you know, hey, what do you do? You know, I ask my seatmate. I don't talk as much as I used to on flights. Generally, not much at all, but you know, sometimes I'll find myself talking to a stranger, and I'll ask him or her what they do. And it seems like I say I'm a musician. I start with that. I'm a musician. Okay. And sometimes I'll say I'm a drummer, but musician is the thing. Like people is just like, oh, like it's just so interesting to everybody. It's so they just get so I start with that, and then people have a little bit of a you know thing where like well, you know, they want to know who you played with, and then if you you know start talking about who you played with, it gives you that instant cred. And so that's like an easy explanation. And then if it's, you know, the conversation goes a step further from there, you say, well, I'm a musician and I teach, you know, I own my own business. It's a private teaching studio that I own, and I consult within the industry. Like everyone can relate to that, you know. Yeah. And my consulting is I consult with companies about education programs, and I also write books about drums and drumming for drummers, and edit books about drums and drumming for drummers. And people usually can latch onto those kinds of ideas, you know?
I love that you start with musician first. That's so cool, right? To say that
Yeah.
this is what I do, because that is the umbrella, that's who we are. And I think that if you're listening to this, I hope you feel really empowered to say the same thing, because I think that's a great way to intro. Because looking at your resume and trying to just even give you an introduction, I was like, oh, I don't know where to start, like all these things. But ultimately, we're musicians, and that's what we do. And there's so many different ways we piece that together, and that's one of the things that I really wanted to try to share about you today and what you do. And then you went into the education thing. So education's been a big part of your life, even though you're really have a big performance career. Is teaching half of that? Is teaching, how do you kind of divide that up
Yeah,
in
so
your?
I would say right now my career is like a three-leg table, right? It's playing my life as a working drummer, and my life as a teacher and a private teacher, and my life as a editor and industry consultant, right? And I mean the reason why I teach, I mean some people like it, some people don't. I started teaching and I realized that I kind of like this, I find it rewarding, and excuse me, and yeah, I find it rewarding, and I'm an editor. Look, I'm very OCD. I grew up loving Rush and learning his drum parts note for note, which so when I started teaching, I was studying with Dom, and then you start teaching, and then you're teaching children, and you're like, oh wow, this isn't like we're not talking about high level things yet here. I'm brought faced with a child who wants to learn the drums. Oh, and then I quickly realized that like this is going to be a lot more enjoyable to me if I like have a plan, like if I make a curriculum. And I started trying to devise a curriculum using books. I always found it confounding that like students would come to me from other teachers and they had no books, only a notebook with things scribbled in it. And I had a teacher who was like that, and I liked him, I learned from him, but I just felt like that's like intellectually lazy. There's great books out about every topic you could possibly imagine. If you're going to teach someone about jazz drumming, why would you not use The Art of Bop Drumming? Like it's the perfect jazz textbook. You don't have to go page by page, but anyway, I just figured, okay, well, yeah, so I started working on a curriculum. I would go to things like PASIC and the NAMM show, and I would go to the publishers' booths and I would look through all the books and I would do research and I would try teaching from one or another. And that's actually how I settled on the Alfred snare drum books as my snare drum books. I tried like a half dozen different ones. I liked that one the best. I started using it. And then I realized like, oh, okay, cool. Like, all right, now this will get me to cover reading and rudiments and sticking. And then this jazz book, and I got the curriculum going. And then I realized, oh, wow, like students like dig this, like they have structure, they have like structure, and then they finish a thing and then they're like, oh yeah, I finished that. And like, I have friends who had things in their teaching practice where they did like a karate model where they gave
Yeah.
awards and there was incentivization and stuff. I never did anything like that, but I think the curriculum sort of gives it its own level of that, where I always felt like that. I'm like, oh man, Dom, we finished stick control. Like, what's next? What's the next secrets, And so I felt like by doing that, I gave myself a vehicle to enjoy teaching. And then I just enjoyed watching people get better. And then probably within the first 10 years I did it, I had students who went to school for music and, decided to try to become professionals. And I was like, wow, man, this is pretty heavy duty. Like I have a big part in whether this person has success in their dream of what they want to do. Like I take it pretty seriously. So that's when I realized I liked it.
Yeah, and I noticed something about drummers at PASIC, talking to maybe 100 of them, is it really seems that they come into the booth and there's like 5 or 7 books. It seems like everybody has for themselves. Like every drummer wants to talk about the books they love, right? Or they'll see an author of something they did, and there's a reverence for like, oh, I love Ted Reed's Progressive Steps to Syncopation, which I use that for all my guitar students, by the way. I love that book. Or whatever, they pick it up and they see this book, and it seems like everyone's got this handful of books that they use in their studios. And I found that was really interesting. It seemed kind of unique to the drum world that there are these books in the canon that people have relied on, that their teachers relied on, that they learned on, and now they use in their studio. Am I correct about
Is
that?
guitar not like that? Is it different?
It is different. there's a, because if you're thinking about classical guitar, there's a lot of methods for that. And if you're thinking about regular pop guitar, there's a lot of methods for that when you think about, what's the alpha, like learning how to, read notes and stuff like that. But so much of guitar, of our heroes, didn't write music, didn't necessarily read music. So a lot of guitar, it really depends on the style that you're learning and the kind of the lineage that you're working on. Like for instance, flamenco music, maybe the most difficult style of guitar playing I think that there is there are methods, but most of it is more based on tradition, right? The way it's taught, the pedagogy of it. And so I think it's just it seems a little more all over the place. And with piano, that's very method driven. And there's a handful of methods, but people generally tend to kind of stick to one or stick to two, right? Or maybe mix and match. Where the drum world just seemed really open, and really they seem to really love them. They seem to think, oh, these are really effective. They work really well, and they stand the test of time.
And drummers want to write books. Like as an editor for Hudson, I'm here to tell you, it's a rite of passage. It's a feather in your cap to be a published author. So I wish I could publish everybody. Some people come with these great ideas, but you can't always do it. But I would say, to connect it back to the teaching thing, over the years, like I still would go through with my curriculum and like try to see if there's better things out now. Like for instance, for Afro-Cuban drumming, I have one newer book that I kind of used the classic one, and then I added, I'm always looking to see if there's a new, better thing, and I'm still trying to practice and get better. So I want to see if there's other newer things out there too. So yeah.
Staying curious, keeping looking around. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to.
And when you teach, I want to ask you one more question about your studio. You have a thriving studio. And do you bring up these topics, for instance, like the unconscious to conscious, knowing and unknowing? Because you seem like a person who's not just really into education, but it seems like you're really into the journey of being a human, right? And I feel, go ahead, but it seems like I feel that just from our brief conversations. Is that part of your scene?
Yeah. Do you teach people of all ages?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I've found that 100%, the answer to your question is yes. I'm an open book. It could be whatever you want. And when someone's a young drummer, and they're coming to me as a blank slate, it's almost like, you're like parenting in a small way. Yeah. Like I've raised 2 children. I'm here to tell you they're wonderful people. My son's a drummer. I believe children thrive with properly structured, kind-hearted discipline. That's my belief. I found that it just works most of the time. For me, like I've seen it happen in drumline. I've seen it happen with my own kids. And so, like I have a student right now, and he was a little scattered when he came in, and we quickly established a couple things that he used to do with his old teacher that I would not accept him doing. One was to tap on anything while I'm speaking to him, and I think this student potentially might have some special needs. I'm not sure, but I mean, I'm not a professional in that area, but I never use it as an excuse for anybody. And I found that students don't want it. So I was like, buddy, don't look at me. Hey, look at me. Don't tap on anything while I'm talking. And he's like, okay. And then like that solved the problem. It was over. And now he'd come in and he still knew. He's like little tap, and he's like, oops, I forgot. Like he's getting it together. He's getting that together. So that I know I'm going into this because I know a lot of people who teach almost all children. Okay. And, being that I teach all these different people, Dom, my teacher, used to say, qualify the student. Is this a kid who's just trying to learn drums to see if they like it? Is this a high school student who's coming to you because they want to go to college for music and they want you to get them ready for auditions? Is this someone who's in college who wants to be a pro and they want to do what you do? Hey man, I want to do what you do. I want to play 15 Broadway shows. Okay, dude, new set of rules in here now. Is this an adult who, you probably get this too, middle-aged person or newly retired person who gave up their dream of wanting to be a full-time musician, but now they're like, I want to start gigging and getting paid. I want to, I'm retired now. I want to be a pro musician, Or is it somebody who they just want to play drums, man? They just want it to be part of their life. And they just want to, like, you went to PASIC, man. They just want to be one of the dudes or the dudettes there, you know? There's a guy I'm teaching now, he's a doctor, you know, and he was going to Dom, and I think I'm so honored that some of Dom's students have come to me since he passed away, you know? And he made a funny comment to me. He was like, you know, he said, Joe, I know I haven't seen you for a lesson it's been a couple months. And I'm like, yeah, I know, whenever you're ready. He's like, you know, it's funny, like, you really expect me to have this stuff down. And I was like, so I found that hilarious. But I was talking to another friend of mine, Mike Sorrentino, another Dom student, longtime drum teacher. And we were saying how, like, yeah, you know, like, it's okay, like, for some of the students who they're adults and they just want to get better. Like, I have to figure out how hardcore to be with everybody, one at a time. They're not all looking at the same goals, you know? And so then that that leads into a doorway of, like, yeah, we can talk about everything. You know, we've talked about, you know, like someone who comes in and they get super nervous in here, and I can tell, I know they practiced for hours and now they can't execute it in front of me. Now it's like, I can't, what am I supposed to do? I'm not going to let them keep doing it and letting the problem snowball. Well, let's talk about that. And I'll be like, look, you know, like, you know, if a doctor took my blood pressure at 758 the first day I played Hamilton, he probably would have put me in the hospital. Okay. You know, I'm with you. Like, I'm with you. Let's talk about this. Like, just, you know, how do you get to where maybe you're nervous, but you can have a technique to get out of it? You know, I've had to contend with that. And there it is. I'll tell my students that, like, I'm with you, you know, I'm trying to solve all the same stuff you're trying to solve.
I'm so glad that I asked you that. And that is such a great answer that I haven't heard in here yet, which is this concept of you qualify who you're working with, and you're qualifying their intention, where they are at that moment. But it sounds like you're also really open to that changing, right? You could start out recreational and become serious because it becomes your thing, but you're also being mindful of what they're experiencing. Like, yeah, this kid worked a lot and seems really stressed out. I'm going to share a story about when I was really stressed out and how I managed it. And because what I'm getting at is, every great teacher that you meet with that I think is a great teacher, they're empathic and they're really present for the journey. And I think this is the great value of music lessons. This is why and I say this in almost every episode, where I have zero fear of this year, of the next 10 years, whatever happens in the world, we are doing something that's so human, right? And so you're connecting with a person. And if you're a parent with a kid if that kid that's tapping on the drum, that moment is so powerful, because that's probably maybe the first time someone just directly listened to them and said something to them, which the kid obviously felt heard and seen. And so that was actually a moment of connection and respect for both of you. You were showing him respect. He was showing you respect. And if a parent, my kids are both athletes, right? As my wife's an actor, I'm a guitar player. Both my kids are great jocks, right? So we have a lot of coaches that work with them. And the value is, of course, on the field or whatever it is they're doing, or their development. But the real value are these safe, trusted adults that are guiding them in a really meaningful way. That informs their life. And that's what we do. It is the most impactful thing that we do, because you said these people grow up and they go off and they do their things, or they come back to it later and you're giving them that gift. So I really loved what you said about just qualifying and being mindful of that, because I think that's something I don't often do. I just think, oh, everybody that comes in, how could you not want to do this? As opposed to being like, oh, your parents are making you come here right now. I can see that. You're beginning the journey, whatever that thing is. So
yeah, I think I mean that, but I also mean somebody who loves it, but they have different goals.
Yeah.
And if I come down too hard on them, you know, by the way, that little dude who I was talking about, who's tapping, he has some other habits, and like, I'm learning from him, because actually he can play, right? Like, so I'm like learning from him. I'm like, okay, like, I noticed that he seemed like he wasn't listening to me. Like, he was staring into the mirror. I have a mirror so you can watch your hands when you play. And I'm talking to him, and in my inner monologue, it's like, I'm not sure if he's getting this. And then I would ask him to play what I just said, and he would play it. So I'm like, okay, all right. Like he's got a different thing. So like I'm trying to keep an open mind. I'm not just coming in here like a taskmaster. I don't want you to think that. And he just finished his first month. You know, we tried out. We decided to try a month, and his mom texted me last week. He loves this. Would you keep teaching him? And I said, yeah, I'd be happy to. And that's like always such a, you know, that's heavy, man. Someone's trusting you. And to what you said, the benefit, you know, there's some stuff that's a drag about getting older, but one of the things that's a benefit of, like what we do is I can see a little further over the horizon than they can, and I can see where it could go. And then that makes me more patient, and it makes me more comfortable and confident to know. And I also have confidence because I've helped to produce some professional musicians. Don't get me wrong, I'm not all flowers. And, you know, I think if you've been doing this for 10 or 20 years and you haven't produced a couple professional musicians, then maybe your curriculum is a little suspect. Like
Fair enough.
I believe in results. Don't get me wrong. I believe in results. Like I want my students to get into the college they want to get into, but they're going to qualify the student, you know? So I'm like, yeah, I guess it's kind of this combination of, I do want people to do the work. I'm not a babysitter. I want people to invest time in this and respect it, but I'm willing to meet them where they live.
Huh. Yeah, that's an awesome philosophy. Let me just switching a little bit. So you also manage, or you're the director of tell me a little about the Sabian Educators or Education Network that you run.
Thank you. That's great. Thanks for asking about that. So the Sabian Education Network is essentially, I would describe it as like a club for drum teachers to come together and talk about everything related to drum teaching. It's for drum set teachers. You know, as you know, Sabian also has a lot of orchestral and marching, like crazy, ridiculous educators. They fall under the supervision and purvey of Mark Reynolds, my colleague who handles that.
Okay.
He deals with the high school band directors, the college band directors, the drum corps people, and the classical musicians. So this is a club for drum set teachers. And so some of the people there, you know, the drum set sort of industry, as you alluded to before, is very supportive of education. For many years, they would pay people to go out and do drum clinics and things. And some companies have had these education programs, and they've been successful at, like, you know, creating a lot of loyalty to these companies for helping out educators. Sabian's got a long time reputation.
Yeah.
Now, my stick company, Vic Firth, for many, many years had kind of a wonderful education program. They still have a really good education program. And so I was exposed to that one first. And when I thought about, so Sabian had approached me about, like, we want to create some kind of, we see the value of these private teachers. We see that they have a huge influence over their students, probably even more than the people they see on YouTube, because you're coming into the room and you're seeing what they're playing. So how can we support them? We want to create something. And, you know, we want to know if you would want to, you know, run it for us. That was the opening call. It wasn't an interview. It was like, is this something you'd want to do? There's a little bit more of a backstory to it, which we probably don't have time to get into, maybe in part two. Having to do with people you know, it was Dom and also this man named Rick Drum. I'll just tell you real quick. He was a music industry executive. He was director of marketing at Remo. Then he was the president of Vic Firth. And then he was the CEO and president of Diodario.
Wow.
The music industry executive, long track record of success. Now he advises companies. You know, he's a corporate coach and, you know, about growth and things like that. Really smart guy. And, you know, you spend years in this industry. I've been offered different jobs over the years.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I value probably more highly on a level that I don't even know how highly is my freedom. So I've been offered jobs doing different things in the industry that were full-time gigs where I had to go into an office or something. And I never took any of them. And Rick was a man who always kind of had an eye on me from afar and offered me a job that was really hard to say no to. I mean, it was a full-time 6-figure job at a big company. And so I said, yeah, you know, I worked, you know, I'm playing and touring and playing on Broadway and teaching. Like, I can't give these things up. These are like my own things, you know, I'm not giving them up. So anyway, he was been advising Sabian, and so he thought of me, and he's like, "There's this thing, and I thought it might be a good thing for you." And I said, "Well, can I maintain the other things I'm doing and do it?" Which we had already had that conversation before, at his old position. And he said, "Yes, you can." So I said, "Great." So I thought, when I said yes to it, I thought to myself, okay, the first time I went to PASIC, I can remember being a young drummer, and there was some older drum teachers that had been to a lot of PASICs, and it was in like Nashville or someplace, and we found ourselves like having coffee, and I met like a drum teacher from Indiana and another guy from California, and oh, here's my friend. Oh, this is the guy I met last year from Florida, and oh, but here's his other friend from Florida who he brought this year, and here's my other friend from Jersey, and we're all having a talk, and we're like, hey man, what do you. There's this new jazz book. Have you guys checked it out? Oh yeah, I checked it out. Yeah, man, I'm just having a like, what happens when your students bail? Like if they're sick, do they have to pay you? Like I'm sick of this, man. Like it's getting so frustrating. People and the schedules with the sports. How do you deal with the scheduling around that? Do they pay you? Like I keep having it. Oh hey man, I have this student who's like, I'm doing everything I can, but I think maybe they have special needs and like they're just not learning anything. Do you have a program for students who like just what do you do? And everybody was like brainstorming, and it was like a social hang, like that you kind of got a glimpse of it at PASIC. And I remember it being like wonderful, like this brother and sisterhood of the drum, as David Garibaldi calls it. And I was like, I want to make that this SCN. I want it to be like this group where we all come together and have that opportunity to share with each other. So I guess the way I've structured it is we have an online forum. Well, you have to join the network. So it's sabianed.com, like education, sabianed.com. You apply, you fill out a little questionnaire, you say how many students you have, and then you get let in, excuse me, and then you get access to this forum where there's all these things organized by topic. Then I do interviews like this, and I have world famous artists on. I usually try to make sure they have some kind of education pedigree. Like I just had on Chester Thompson, who was in Genesis, and Phil Collins and Frank Zappa and Weather Report, but he taught at Belmont University for years, Ignacio Baroa, the legendary drummer with Dizzy Gillespie, who also has 2 books out. And
wow.
Yeah, so there's a whole repository of interviews, and these are for members only. It's a live interview. They can ask questions and interact with the guest. And then we have I send out a newsletter where I try to feature some of the members. Like I encourage them to tell me what they've been up to. And I'm like, hey, Eric just had his annual recital, and here's some pictures. We get a release sign if there's kids in it, and, share the love, like feature the members and stuff. We used to do in-person events that were really great, like panel discussions, like the one we did at PASIC. Unfortunately, a lot of that fell victim to post-COVID budget cuts, but I hope that we can do some more of that again. But anyway, that's sort of the cliff notes.
So it's a closed forum where people can, and thanks for sharing like some of the things that people talk about. That was my next question is when you get a bunch of drummers together in a room, so they're talking about methods what else do drum teachers, give a little more insight into that. Like what are the things that challenge, if you're a young drummer and you're going out and trying to do your deal, what are the things that these experts or people that have been doing a long time, what are the conversations about?
Let me I'm going to actually open up the forum and look at the last.
Oh, cool.
Some of the threads here. There's actually, you'll be interested in this. There's a thread about what are these scheduling apps and platforms you guys have been using. I've been using this one, but I'm thinking it has some shortcomings. I want to try another one. We'll talk.
Wait a second. I know somebody that knows a lot about that stuff.
As they say in Jersey, I know a guy.
Yeah.
Someone posted small business and equipment insurance. Great topic, right? So
Great topic.
My studio's in my home. I'm constantly telling people, by the way, if somebody falls down your stairs and your homeowner's insurance company finds out that it was for a music lesson, you have a problem. I tell my students, some of my adult students ask about it. It's like, yeah, I have a homeowner's policy because the homeowners won't cover it if you fall down my stairs. Don't get any funny ideas.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
And then I encourage members who have books out to go ahead and post samples in there. There's always different discussions about how to handle students with disabilities and special needs. We have a few members who are really into that and great at it. And like, I admire the nth degree that are always sharing ideas. And it's like really actually pretty inspiring how better at that most drum teachers want to become. So that's topic. And then definitely retention and recruitment, always common topic.
Growing a studio. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, like that. And then every once in a while there's like a discussion of some pedagogy, not really much. There's not really a lot of like, hey, check out this paradiddle exercise. I mean, that's like all over the internet.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So, I don't get like, we don't get dozens of posts a day. We get, a couple per day, but it's all, I've hesitated to let it go on to like a Facebook group or anything because it's all like a very, I don't want to use the word controlled. It's like a private, safe space. Like there's never been a grain of sand thrown in that sandbox. It's been respectful, and now it's like gone back a few years. So I feel like there's a lot of valuable discussions in there. I wish it's hard, in this day and age to get people to go into a forum and it's like over with. I get that, but
it sounds like it's working. And I have to. I was walking around this. I was told that I should come meet you, and I walked around the Sabian booth to come find you, and you were flooded with people. I'll never forget this. And then it was a photo moment where you were going to get in front of the big Sabian signs and take a picture of the SEN. And there was a lot of people there. I mean, you were standing in a sea of drum teachers. It was really cool, and they looked really happy to be together. So that was my first like memory of ever seeing you out in the wild. And I'll share that photo when we share this episode. But it was really cool to see. It sounds like it's a really impactful place. And I think when you have a community, if it's really like you said, that thing, no one's ever like, people respect the space. No one's sullied the space. It'd be supremely uncool to sully that space. And so people will go to the venue, to the forum, wherever that thing is, to be part of something if it's actually meaningful. And if there's kind of a sacred thing to it. We're drum teachers and we're doing this thing and we're going to be cool and not talk about the stuff that's all over YouTube. I think that's really great. And how would you assess that the health of the drum or the percussion, private lesson space, like and like just right now in general in our culture, is there and because you've been doing this for a long time, right? How would you assess the health of it these days?
That's a really good question. I do survey the members. I have to admit there's been a little bit more of a weight on some questions that are centered around the brand, the Sabian brand, and less around questions like, do you have more students or less than you had 3 years ago or whatever? So I don't have numbers at my disposal. I just have kind of my circumstantial evidence.
Yeah, more just your take on it.
Yeah. So, but you're making me think about that we want to. It's sort of like this assumed given, even talking to other executives in the industry, like my friend Rick or whatever, that it's shrinking, right? And there's less kids taking lessons. And my feeling was just trying to be scientific, not trying to be nostalgic about when I came in. I started playing the drums because I saw Neil Peart and Alex Van Halen and Phil Collins on TV and on the radio. I heard them featured I heard Subdivisions, and there's like this sicko drum part. And I heard a Journey song, Separate Ways, and there's like a drum break in it. I was attuned to the culture, and so the drums jumped out at me. I'm not sure if they jump out at me now the same way, only because like you don't see the drummers that much anymore. So, for instance, Taylor Swift and Beyonce and Lady Gaga all have some ridiculous, amazing drummers, like crazy great. But like, when you don't really see them in the output of those artists per se, like they're like on the Super Bowl. I remember Brian Fraser Moore was playing with, I think, Pink or one of the 6 artists that Brian has played the Super Bowl with. The guy's like amazing. But we made cymbals for him and it was really super crazy. And, he posted pictures of him on stage, but like during the performance, it might've been Lady Gaga. I think like I saw him in silhouette like once. I didn't really see him. Like she was doing her thing with a million dancers. Like I just think there's less like guitar, bass, and drums. Like, and by the way, rock and roll, let's face it, somebody once said the Beatles created a tidal wave in the music industry, and now the tsunami's finally started to recede. Like, if you talk about people like Dom's age, Greg Bissonette, and people that age, why'd you want to be in a band? I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, and
Yeah.
somebody picked out the bass and somebody picked out the. So there's plenty of people who see like Broadway is like a hot commodity. The Voice and American Idol, like there's overflowing with kids who want to be on Broadway and sing and dance and act for sure. That's what they see. They're seeing that. They're seeing those. So the musicians, I think, has become a little less wide of a playing field. My little local sort of poll thing was, the drum line in the two towns around me. Like, so when I went to high school in the 80s, there was like 25 kids in the drum line, and the one in our town here in Whippany is about the same size. Probably like 18 or 19 kids had a drum set. It was just cool to try to be good at drum set.
Yeah.
Now, when I did a clinic there like 10 years ago, there was like 3 kids who had a drum set. And then my son, he's a drummer, he was teaching there right after he got out of school. There was 2 kids there, and he didn't get any students out of it at all. Like none, no private drum set students out of it at all.
Really?
So, yeah. So I think my feeling is, and I have way less local drum students than I used to have. I mean, my practice has changed. I get people from further afield. So like I have like some 10 and 11 and 12 and 13-year-old students who live in Japan and Costa Rica and like faraway places. But I do think there's less. Yeah.
It's interesting because there's a subculture of shredder guitar players on YouTube, young kids doing crazy like slapping and ripping and shredding, and there's also like a real post-vi shredding scene of kids in front of their computers just ripping all over the place. And I think it's created still a good buzz of kids learning, wanting to play rock guitar, what we think of as rock guitar. And hopefully that's the great thing, is there's all these little like micro communities of music. And I know that like college live bands, there's a ton of live bands touring the college scene because kids always want that. So I hope that scene stays really vibrant. Do you, I know you, speaking of which, you have to go teach a lesson in a few minutes, and we could literally talk all day. So,
but by the way, I just want to say, I don't want to sound like all doom and gloom. I mean, like the level of playing right now, it's like insane.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, it's crazy. And, I mean, I would never use any of what I just said as a reason to dissuade someone from trying to do this if it's what they really believe in.
Oh, it sounds like an opportunity.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely a different environment. Like every single student I teach who's serious in high school, and certainly all the ones in college, and many of the ones who just got out of college and are starting a career, every single one of them, however they decide to cage it or circle around it and approach it, how do I get to play Broadway like you did? And I know you may want to ask me that, so why don't I just tell you what I tell them?
Yeah.
Here's what I did. I played like 1,000 shitty gigs and some probably like 300 good gigs with like everybody that I could find and the best musicians. I tried to play with the best musicians in every different style I could find in and around New Jersey and New York. And then one day I was playing a gig with somebody and they were like, hey, so-and-so, this guy on Broadway moving out needs a sub, and you'd probably be good. Oh, I don't know him. Well, call me tomorrow. I'll introduce you to him. So that was my way in. I didn't go have coffee with a guy who had a Broadway show. I didn't do any of that stuff. I played 1,000 gigs, and then somebody heard me and they recommended me.
You showed up. That was in the first minute of your talking. You talked about showing up in high school, which I just loved. You talked about, I'm playing the bake sale with this band.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great closing thought too, which is you showed up. You did, what is it, 1,000 crappy gigs and 300 good ones or something like that?
Yeah.
So I like that. That's a great, and I think a lot of people, they lose sight of that it takes doing the gigs, it takes showing up, and it's consistency and just being persistent. So that's awesome. Is there any other, for a young teacher, and you're mentoring your son right now, right? Which is amazing. You told me this, and we could have spent the entire time talking about this, and we'll have to do this again. But for someone going out right now in this moment, in this space, obviously you're encouraging them, but is there, aside from showing up and doing the gigs, what's another like kind of parting piece of wisdom that you might want to share with a teacher or
I think like what they might tell their students is what you're asking?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing I've told my son and other people that he's been mentored by have told him the same thing is to be open to these other things, these other aspects of your career. Like, what'd you call it again? Hyphen something?
Multi-hyphenate. Yeah.
Um,
Good. Doing the three-legged stool. Yeah, exactly.
so he like totally like him. He's trying to, he's got me as a model because I'm his dad. He's trying to get some other consulting work in the business. He's doing a little work for Hudson on the side. He has some part-time stuff he does in the morning. So I know some of the college teachers, like some of the great longtime instructors have started telling their students, hey, you may not make it all happen with gigs. You may want to do some other things, whether it's teaching, whether it's some other kind of work that's related to what your expertise in music. So I tell my students, yeah, just be open to all those different things. And and I just tell them like, hey, just be open to different experiences. And like you said, you don't go on an interview and get a job like, hey, I have my engineering degree. I'm going to go interview at Honeywell. Maybe I'll get a job. It doesn't work like that. Like you have to just go out and play gigs and hang out your shingle that you teach and hope. There's no guarantee that it's going to work. That's the thing that's crazy about this. There's just no guarantee.
But it does. Somehow it does. Yeah.
Well, you put your face out there to the world and the universe and you try to get it to recognize your value. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. So I would say, one piece of advice is to try to just find the reasons to invest in yourself. For all the people you saw at the PASIC convention, I can tell you, I've told everybody for a fact, I would not be the editor for Hudson Music. I would not have all these books out, and I would not be the director of Sabine Education Network if I didn't fly myself to PASIC and NAMM on my own dime for like 20 years in a row. Okay. I met the people who knew about me. You're either in the thing or you're not in it. And I was there and people knew me, and that's how I got established, so, we had a challenging time. We had a government shutdown. There was people who were like, oh, I can't make it to PASIC this time because, my flight might get canceled. I kind of felt like Dom. I was like, I was on 6 flights this week, people. Get your butt out there, And I was, by the way. Actually, it's not a lie. So, yeah, invest in yourself and find reasons to do it and try not to fall victim to the excuses of the path of least resistance, because the people who are going to succeed in this business, never. They take another Dom nugget. Dom had many nuggets of wisdom. For the most growth, you take the path of most resistance.
For the most growth, take the path of most resistance. I love it. Okay. That's a lovely sentiment to end this chat on. I know you have to run and teach a lesson, but if people want to learn more about what you do, or what's the best way to learn about Joe Bergamini?
I have a website. It's joebergamini.com. You can see all my books, and I have some other things on there. I have a website with charts for working drummers, like roadmaps. And then I'm on Instagram and Facebook. On Facebook, I think you can go to it's Joe Bergamini Drums. And
great.
On Instagram, it's just my name. So,
well, Joe, and I'm gonna share these in the program notes too. But you have shared so much, just such a wealth of knowledge today, and so many great tidbits and so many great perspectives. So thank you so much for doing this. I hope we can have this conversation again sometime. And I really look forward to learning more about you and hanging out again. This was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric. It was my pleasure.
You've been listening to the 440 Podcast. If you found this helpful, subscribe at Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to podcasts, and leave a quick rating. It makes a big difference. To learn more about how to run your teaching studio with less stress and more joy, visit fonz.com. I'm Eric Branner. Thanks for being here.